Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Sheila Butler. She's a chief marketing officer with over 25 years of experience shaping integrated marketing strategies, building global loyalty programs, and driving customer engagement across both B2C and B2B sectors. Her track record includes leadership roles at companies including Disney, JPMorgan Chase, and Choice Hotels. She has a Bachelor of Science in Music and Business, Arts Administration from Indiana University, and an MBA from University of North Carolina's Kenan-Flagler Business School. So Sheila, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We have a lot of shared interests, music being one of them, even though I didn't study music and I didn't read that as smoothly as I could have. So what you had basically a double major in music and arts administration?
Yeah, so I went to Indiana University, and when I decided that I wanted to study music, I really got lucky because my parents said I needed to go to a state school. And because I'm the youngest of three girls, so they thought, we're going to pay for college, we're going to pay for weddings, so you got to do a state school.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Indiana was ranked as in the top 5 of music schools in the country at the time for voice. And so voice is my instrument. So I'm a classically trained singer. And when I was talking with my parents, they were like, listen, what are you going to do with a music degree? And I'm like, I don't know. Hit it big, maybe not. I don't know. And so what they told me was, if you're going to major in music, you really need to have a double major.
Mm-hmm.
And Indiana had a program at the time. It was sort of like create your own path sort of thing. So it allowed me to have a major in music. Plus I had another major and I could just make it up. So I sat there with the school counselor or whatever at the time when I had to declare the second major. And I basically went through and picked out the base undergrad curriculum for business school. So like business law, which is actually the most meaningful business class that I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
Accounting and finance and things like that. Marketing being one of them. And then the other half of the classes that I picked out were part of the master's curriculum for arts administration, because ultimately I thought that I would be marketing a theater organization, an opera company, a symphony, a something or other. And so I got really lucky, but because of that double major, I had a super senior year, as I call it. So I had a first senior year and a second senior year to get all the classes in, because some of the master's classes were only offered every other year.
I almost pursued a path like that. My music involved drumsticks, percussion, and I was pretty serious about music. Northwestern, where I went, fellow Big Ten school, had a music engineering double major program, which I decided was not right for me. I know some people who did it. I just went the engineering route, but so we share a love of music and an appreciation for how challenging those careers can be. But we also we both ended up kind of pursuing something a little different, but we also have a shared love for bourbon, which we can see like right in Sheila's LinkedIn profile. It says, this might not be literally true, will work for bourbon.
Yes.
Right.
So cheers to that.
Cheers to that. We are going to have a sip here. It's close enough to 5 o'clock as we are recording this. And I'm going to ask you more about it later, that Sheila has a new podcast called Marketing Over Bourbon. And we're going to call this Mistakes Over Bourbon. How's that?
Fair enough. Okay.
At least this episode. So plenty to talk about, with your marketing work and the new podcast and all sorts of things. But the first question we always start with here, Sheila, what's your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake is a decision that I made after I graduated from Indiana University. So I thought, like I said, I was going to pursue something around like marketing and the arts. And so all of my internships during college were at arts organizations, Summer Stock Theater Company, a big theater in Indianapolis as house manager, different things like that. And so Wolf Trap Opera Company. So I thought, surely that's the path I'm going to go down. But I also had this dream since I was 6 of working at Walt Disney World. I decided on my second trip down there, this feels like home. I want to work here one day. And I was so bent on that, right?
Yeah.
So my mistake is that I was not the rational person starting a career thinking, I've got a double major, and so I can make some decent money, especially if I leaned in on the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I could pursue, and most people think about, what do you want to earn and what sort of life do you want to tee up for? Because the first job that you pick really sets the pricing for your value in the marketplace for future jobs, right?
Yeah.
So no, not me. So what do I decide to do? I decide that I found someone who would give me a shot at Disney. I worked on a special event in the last 4 months of college for Disney Creative Entertainment that produces all the parades and fireworks and so forth for Disney parks. And at the end of volunteering for them for 4 months in Indianapolis, they said, if you ever want a job at Disney, we will set up the interviews. I said, yes, please. So I drove down from Indiana down to Orlando with everything that could fit, my brand new Honda Civic, stuffed to the gills, and I rented a room by the week until I got my job at Disney. My job at Disney paid $8.95, which is far above the minimum wage at the time, which was like $4.50 or something.
Double the minimum wage, not quite.
Yeah. Right. So I'm living large. I think the first year at Disney, I made around $17,000. So I qualified for welfare in Florida, essentially, because I was making that little money. Right. And what I will tell you is that even when I progressed, and by the way, what's funny is that first job, it was in Disney Magic Kingdom Entertainment. So think of Magic Kingdom Park, their entertainment. And they had this thing called Magic Music Days where schools and like dance schools and so forth, but, high schoolers, college students, whatever, could come and perform at Disney. And I stage managed their performance, something like 800 performances with marching bands in the parades on ABC television and cheerleaders. I'd had 200 clowns and international accordion band. Like I saw it all in the course of like 4.5 years. And I convinced someone in Disney marketing to bring me on for a gig in marketing because I wanted to work on the special events strategy side of it. By the time I left Disney after 7 years, I had grown my salary to like $32,000. Again, super small.
Yeah.
And when I left Disney and I went to Philadelphia, I was able to almost double that, I think, in my next job. But what I'll tell you is that then what happened was I started to realize, especially when I went from that tech job where I doubled things to then JPMorgan Chase, which was Bank One at the time, I realized that the bands of pay are so big in corporate America that when I got hired, I was at the bottom of the band. And do you know how many 3% raises it takes to get you to the high end of that same band, right? For the level that you're at. And then how many times it takes to get promoted. What I figured out over time is that I left hundreds of thousands of dollars of earning potential on the table. It also means hundreds of thousands of dollars that weren't multiplied in my 401k match, right? And all these different things, your bonus is a percentage of what you're making. I left so much on the table because I made that decision to go after my passion instead of go after the money. Fast forward to when I started my company in May of last year, and I started going through my network trying to find clients. Every single client, except for my most recent one, has come because I worked at Disney, because of the people that I know at Disney, the network that I've built over time. Either I worked with them or I met them later and have become really good friends with them. And that's been my huge feeder network. So it was a mistake in that it was a financial decision that most people would not have made, but it's yielded so much more in terms of richness in my life and friendships and a flourishing business because of that.
Wow. So it sounds like there's kind of a story arc where you were happy to have the job, and then there was a period where you felt like it was a mistake, at least financially.
Yeah.
But now you've come around to see maybe it is
It
working
always,
out for the best a little too
yeah.
strong, or does that seem accurate?
No, it's all working out the way it's supposed to. But it did not feel like that at the time, right?
Yeah,
I would look at other people and I'm thinking, we're doing the same exact job, and I'm pretty sure you're getting paid $20,000, $30,000 more than I am.
yeah. And that's interesting that HR, it's been so long since I've been in such a corporate environment like that, 20 years, that I recognize what you're saying about pay bands, and that they wouldn't kind of level you up to really what your market rate would be, because the band had them convinced, well, we don't have to pay her
Correct.
any more than that. But did they run the risk of losing you, or you felt like, well, the next company then you would have been anchored still in
Yeah,
their
you know what?
low end?
I stayed at Bank One slash Chase for 17 years. And when I left there and I went to Choice Hotels, that's actually when I finally got to
Mm.
what my market value should have been.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and that's an argument for, like, a company shouldn't ask what's your current salary, or that you should be
Correct.
careful answering that, because you really should talk about, and maybe this is along the lines of marketing yourself, like marketing
Yep.
your value, not marketing your cost or your
Correct.
previous cost, right?
Yes, exactly. And many times they do. They ask you, what are you currently making?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And if you're not where you should be, then you may not get to where you want to be next.
yeah. Based on annual reviews and even positive reviews, or annual, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
cost of living increases. Did you? Because when you started telling the story, I thought, and for those who are watching on YouTube, might see red hair and think like, did you jump at it? Did you perform as Ariel, the Little Mermaid? But no, it was really more of like an operations type job that still was just kind of a low salary.
So I when I was stage managing the entertainment, what's interesting is the requirement to be in that job was that everyone had to have a music degree just to stage manage, just to
Why do you think that
or
was?
it was because they just wanted that level of understanding
Oh, okay.
when you were hosting a group, that you could speak to the band director and you could talk about the music and really understand, like, are there certain lighting cues, like are there certain performance needs that I need to convey to the technical team supporting the lighting and the sound and the whatever, right?
Yeah.
Any sort of like blocking and choreography that I need to be aware of that might be problematic on the parade route, kind of thing. So they
Mhm.
really wanted a high level of expertise. And what I would tell you is that, I don't know if you had kids, and I don't know if they performed at Disney or other places, but I felt such a responsibility because these kids have been dreaming about this for years. They've been
Right.
practicing really hard, and they've fundraised. They've sold citrus and candles and wrapping paper and cheese and pizzas and whatever. And I'm their person that day to make their dreams come true. Like, I can't let them down or the parents down. Like, they've all been working so
Right.
hard, and this is the day.
They're spending a lot of money to bring them down there, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that was a lot of fun to be a part of. And I'm glad the story ended up with where you are today, with Butler Marketing Group as your company. So I've got other questions about that and your other work. But since you're holding up your glass, I was going to ask you what you're sipping on. We're not
I'm,
drinking, we're tasting, right?
that's right.
What are you tasting?
I'm sipping Woodford. I love Woodford Reserve. I
Mhm.
mostly drink it neat. I love a good old fashioned.
Mhm.
I make actually a really mean Cracker Jack old fashioned. I will share the insights with you if you want that. If you like a good Cracker Jack.
If you will share, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'm picturing the caramel. Well, no, I'll just let you tell me. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
So
Kinds
you
of
take a
things, yeah.
ball canning jar or anything that you can put, like, just to save for a couple days, and you put in equal parts Woodford, as I like to use, but you can
Mhm.
use other bourbon, Buffalo Trace or whatever. Equal parts bourbon and Cracker Jacks minus the peanuts, because the
Yeah.
peanuts don't disintegrate. But within a day or two, the Cracker Jacks have like literally melted into the bourbon.
Oh, wow.
And I just kind of mix it around each day, and I taste a little bit of it, and I write some tasting notes down. Probably like day 2 or 3, I'm pretty satisfied with it. You
Mhm.
just pour that over a big ice cube and serve it with a disappointing toy in your glass, just like you would get a disappointing toy in a Cracker Jack box, and you're good to go. It's so sweet. You don't need any simple syrup.
Right. Well, it's coming in out of that candy, and I bet, I mean, the corn and the popcorn, whatever notes are there should play well with the corn dominant bourbon.
Exactly.
Well, good. Yeah, I love Woodford. I am drinking. For me, it's the most local of my local bourbons. New Riff Distillery
Oh, I don't
from
know
here
that.
in northern Kentucky. Are you familiar with them? They're maybe
No.
available in Florida now. New Riff Distilling. Now, this is a special release. They call it their winter whiskey. So it's a straight bourbon whiskey, but it's also made with malted oak and chocolate malted barley.
Oh,
So and I'll tell you, there's I'm sipping it neat. This is a new bottle for me. Like there certainly is a lot of spice, but almost so aggressively so that I think this would make a great old fashioned more than I'm enjoying it neat. Like it needs
and I
to. I
need,
think the
yeah.
spice needs to balance out. I don't
Oh,
want a really
interesting.
sweet old fashioned, but it's like the
Nice.
bitters are already in here.
Okay. So Hard Truth is one that I just heard of recently, and I was talking with some
Hmm.
friends. It's made in Indiana, where I'm from, and not far away. It's like Nashville, Indiana, which is not far from Bloomington. So
Okay.
I've tried that a little bit. But yeah, I went shopping the other day for a couple bourbons. I'm super excited. I will get them soon. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm always expanding my bourbon bar. I've got 12. I'm adding more. But see, this is why. So I'm started the show, right? Marketing over bourbon.
Hmm.
And it's like literally talking with different people. They may have a marketing background, or they may just talk about things and we can land some marketing principles and things. And while we're sipping bourbon and
Yeah.
maybe trying out some cocktails, right? I mean, like
Mm.
what is it about the shape of a bottle or the label that makes you want to buy bourbon when it's
Oh. Hmm.
essentially the same thing, right? It's like for me, marketing credit cards, a hotel is a hotel is a hotel in different segments, right? So a bourbon is a bourbon is a bourbon, but we all have our favorites. We're all drawn towards something. How do you get someone to try? How do you create awareness for your brand? How do you attract people when there's nothing you can say? It's just on the shelf, right? So how do you stand out as a brand? There are many different parallels.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just fun to sip bourbon and talk with people.
Kind of nice, relaxed way of doing that. So check that podcast out wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. Marketing over bourbon. We talk about books. People do judge a book by its cover. I think people do judge a bottle by its look. Woodford Reserve has a pretty unique shape. You could
Right?
recognize
Mine
it.
is this size to christen a cruise ship. Yes.
It's, New Riff has this bottle that's semi-translucent,
Hmm.
or it's just the black matte. It sort of jumps out once you learn to recognize it. So I guess there's that question of like what catches your eye initially, and then you want repeat customers. So it's
Right.
got to be recognizable. So if you see it at a bar and you remember liking it, you'd order it.
Exactly. Right. And an interesting name as well. Something memorable.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So have you worked with any small distillers or distilling companies? It seems like you could create some connections for yourself through this
I'm
podcast.
hoping to, right? I think that I will. I joined Bourbon Women recently, and they've got a Florida chapter. They were going to have a tasting in the Orlando area, and unfortunately, a hurricane was coming through, so that got postponed. But yeah, I'm trying to dive into that community and meet more people, especially just to raise awareness for the great work being done in bourbon, the women in bourbon, and how they're really trailblazing things, but may not always get the press
Yeah.
that others may. And it's a really competitive space. How do you launch a brand? How do you launch a bourbon brand
Mhm.
and really get it out there and convince people that there's a space. But just like performers, there's a voice, there's room for a new voice, right? And there's a room for a new bourbon too.
Yeah. And there's are hundreds of new bourbons, it seems, all the time, or hundreds of choices on the shelf at a better, bigger liquor store. But a recent guest I've loved interviewing distillers here on My Favorite Mistake. One of the most recent distiller, Joyce Nethery, who is not only one of the relatively small number of women who are master distillers at Jeptha Creed Distillery. She's a part of an even smaller number being an owner, a female
Amazing.
owner of a distillery. And there are certainly, there's a long history of women working in distilling, and more so you're hearing more about women as distillers and blenders and really getting into the production and design of these bourbons.
Sounds like someone I need to meet.
Yeah. So I'm going to get you introduced. So again, our guest today is Sheila Butler, Butler Marketing Group. Tell us a little bit more about the decision and the story to launch your own company, and that's always exciting, and I'm sure sometimes you wonder. I hope you'd never thought, oh, am I making a mistake? But that happens.
You know what? So I wondered, right? So what I was chief marketing officer for a regional bank that was investing in fintechs in the Orlando area. And they had come to an economic decision that they were going to trim the staff. And it was the first time ever that I had been caught up in losing my job. My job was eliminated. And which was remarkable if I think about it, having come from Disney, Chase, Choice, like how in my entire career have I not gone through a layoff yet? But I found myself, when I realized what was happening, what was about to happen, I went on GoDaddy, I bought a URL. A couple of days later, I went on LegalZoom, I formed an LLC, and I was ready when they gave me the news. So I thought, wow, I'm just going to create a business using my superpowers of what I've done throughout my career. And so I focused on transforming brands, especially when they're at an inflection point around a merger and acquisition, something like that. Loyalty program design and optimization, marketing strategy, fractional chief marketing officer work, and strategic partnerships. And it's been amazing. Like I said, like my referrals have all been because of the relationships that I've built and cultivated through Disney people. And that's a really wide net. So I'm industry agnostic. I've worked with many different industries as clients in the past year and a half ish, a little bit more than that. And I'm loving it. It's amazing. But there are times as an entrepreneur, there are times where you go, oh my God, like, is this like, maybe I should go back to full-time work. And then you realize that this is where you're meant to be, right? And every time I've had that moment where I'm like, holy, right? Oh my God, I just got to go back to full time. And you apply for a couple things, and then suddenly, boom, like the huge client walks in, and you just go, okay, got it. All right, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So you keep doing. I'm loving it. I really am.
Good. I'm glad to hear. And you're in the Orlando area. There's probably a great network of former Disney people right there in the area.
Yeah, in fact, there a lot of my guests are former Disney because of the fact that I'm filming in a studio in the Orlando area. So for the production value, I'd really like for someone to be in person. And yeah, so it's going to be heavy on in future episodes. It's going to be heavy on former Disney people and really talking a lot about like the inside stories, the stories you haven't heard before, the inside access to things. And I think that will be a nice point of difference in the sea of there's so many podcasts and shows, right? The content is immense. So hopefully the intersection of marketing, bourbon, and a heavy on Disney will be appealing to people.
Yeah. I mean, if there's room for more podcasts,
that's right.
Like there's room for more bourbons. You're right. It gets more and more competitive, but you've got your own unique approach to it, like the better bourbons do. Now, I see over your shoulder, and I know you wanted to make sure that it was visible on screen for those who are watching, the Bad Kitty Lounge. No, other shoulder when we're mirrored on screen. Yeah.
We are
We're not,
weird.
we're not weather people where we can point behind us to the screen. But what is the Bad Kitty Lounge?
It's just, just a fun piece of art in my office here. I wanted something that was going to be memorable and something that it actually pulls in my branding colors for my business, and just something that just I don't take myself that seriously. I take my work very seriously. I don't take life all that seriously. I wear a Mickey Mouse watch every day. It's so like. So I just thought Back Kitty Lounge. Okay, yeah. So when I'm talking with people doing this kind of thing or meeting with clients, just have a good place to chill.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if that was a past business or a client or no. It's
No,
artwork.
just kind of my vibe. Yeah.
Good.
A cat, I don't know
Cheers
if you've
to that.
ever had I don't know if you've ever had cats, but
No.
they always sit on things you don't want them to sit on. So if I had a cat right now, it'd probably be sitting on my laptop, messing up my camera for this show.
Hopefully
So
not getting
it's
into your drink. Yeah.
Bad kitty sitting on top of a Manhattan.
Yeah. Now, do you prefer a bourbon Manhattan or a rye Manhattan?
Bourbon.
Bourbon? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Team Rye. Not that I wasn't trying to pick an argument about that.
So there's a cocktail I love at Disney's Grand Floridian at Citrus Coast Lounge. They've got a 212, and it's a really, really good Manhattan. It's got some good chocolate bitters in it. So yeah, actually, now that I say that, I'm kind of craving that. That's about 15 minutes away from my house. So that may be in order in the next week or so.
Yeah. And I think this new riff winter whiskey has like notes of like chocolate bitters, and that's from like it feels like it's already kind of a cocktail, but without the syrup.
That sounds
Or the
really
sugar.
good. Yeah, you had me at chocolate earlier. Actually, another one of my go-tos, it's more of like a light whiskey, is Ballantine or Valentine.
Right.
I don't know how to say it.
I
But
think,
I love the chocolate toffee one. It's like literally just dessert. So if you go, do I want dessert or do I want another bourbon? Oh, I'll just sip my dessert. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. Ballantine or Valentine's blended Scotch as
Yes.
opposed to bourbon. So in the same whiskey category. I imagine if somebody wanted to come on marketing over bourbon and drink another whiskey, that'd probably be okay.
Totally. Yeah. Just come on over to Orlando. Yeah. I've got a great set and I'm really, really excited. My producer's amazing. And also former Disney, of course, right? Shocker.
Yeah.
And it's been a great deal of fun. I'm really, really excited.
Yeah. Well, good. And I mean, I've only done these through the internet remote recording. Being able to record in person, I'm sure would open up other opportunities. One of the podcasts, by the way, I'm going to promote my own podcast to my listeners and people who might be listening to you about bourbon, but in my space, not marketing, but in what we call the lean management approach, which is in a nutshell, it's kind of a different label for the Toyota production system and leadership approach. I've been hosting a podcast called Lean Whiskey, where it's very similar to, instead of marketing over bourbon, this is, kind of talking shop about our profession over bourbon or whiskey or a cocktail. So I think you're onto something. That idea, doing a podcast where we're drinking bourbon hasn't ruined my career.
Exactly, right?
I don't think, no.
In fact, it spun it off to a second show. So there you go.
No huge mistake from that one, but yeah, I mean, I always say it's not like the show Drunk History. We're not drunk. We're drinking.
Correct. Yes.
We're being responsible.
Correct. Yes. Limit the number of episodes that you tape in one sitting.
Yes. That would be a mistake to avoid.
Or add water. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got some questions. I want to also ask you about marketing and some of the work you've done, and I think some of the trends in more recent years of companies wanting or having the opportunity to be more data driven and determine more of an ROI on marketing and advertising spend. What are some of the trends that you've seen, or some of the things that you've been able to work with along those lines?
Yeah, so I was incredibly fortunate when I was at Chase that my last role was basically a role around investment decisioning for new customer acquisition. So they have a center of excellence for marketing, and that's where all of new customer acquisitions is innovated and so forth. And so it's got a digital team, it's got an email team, it's got an affiliate marketing team, et cetera, et cetera. My role was unique in that I was one of two people who would sit with the analysts and look at the previous data of card members who have been acquired by product, by month, by year, so which we call vintage, and then looking at the lifetime value of that customer. And so then using that data, as you said, right, data driven, using that data to then project how much marketing investment do we want to spend by product, by channel, by tactic for the next quarter and for the next year, essentially, right? That was an amazing learning experience. And one that what I have found is that it's very difficult in companies to determine lifetime value of a customer
Mhm.
because you need a single source of truth where all the data resides, and you need to be tracking all that information about the customer to then sort of project. If I could find another Mark, right? And I know what Mark spends. So if I can find Mark like people, or Mark prefers his friends, then I can project that they likely will be similar in behaviors to him, right? I think that that is essential for companies to get there. And some may never figure out the lifetime value, but that's essential. When I work on marketing strategy, I don't start with just like let's see what you're doing and what's the calendar, right? I start with the data. What are the
Mhm.
KPIs? What's the performance? Do they even track them? Sometimes they don't. Like they don't have the data, they don't have access to the data. It's sitting in multiple places. The data fields don't match, et cetera, et cetera. But you start with the data and then say, what does the data tell me? What are the
Mhm.
business objectives and goals? How do I tie marketing objectives and communication objectives to those? And then based upon that, what's the strategy and what are the tactics? And then you dive into the tactics. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times in marketing organizations, people are so eager to just dive into someone asks for an email, so I'm going to write an email. But what they're not figuring out is, does that email have a purpose and where does it fit within the owned, earned, and paid marketing channel strategy of a company to deliver on the bottom line business objectives?
Mhm.
So I think teaching people about marketing strategy has been really, really
Mhm.
key in my role because I feel like a lot of people don't know it and haven't learned it yet. But
Mhm.
it's essential for them to
Yeah.
be truly successful and for
Yeah.
their campaigns to be successful.
And that resonates with me and my engineer brain with an MBA of and even in work I do of trying to separate out a little bit and look for connections of not just the activity and what we're doing, but what are the outcomes, the results, and the benefits. And at some point, that's got to come together. So I like that idea of kind of starting with the business need and the aims, and maybe it seems even with digital marketing, which I'm sure there was a lot of that happening
Yep.
at Chase. Digital marketing gives us more data. Hopefully, we're making good decisions off of that
Exactly.
data. Because one other question I would have is like what happens when the data flies in the face of what somebody wants to be true? They've estimated the lifetime value of me to be here. Like, oh, the data says something else.
So it's funny. So people know how to spin data in the way that they want to spin data and tell the story that they want to tell,
Mhm.
right? So there's one. So we're going to put that aside.
Yeah.
What I will say is one of my roles as a leader, I realized as a new leader in the organization that people were very uncomfortable with the accountability, responsibility that I was bringing into the
Mhm.
org,
Mhm.
the team that I was inheriting. And because they hadn't had the requests to set up a pro forma or projections and say, what are we going to achieve? How much are what did we do last year? what's the projection? Where's the 10 or 20% growth? What do we think we can get out of these things? How are we going to get there? Right. And then having those then projections for each campaign and saying, these are the goals, these are the KPIs. And it wasn't that you weren't going to get in trouble if you didn't meet them, but just learning and having the discipline to set them. And then to actually realize that you can achieve these things. But there was a resistance because there was a fear of, but what about if I'm not right? And I'm like, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just about learning this. And then we set a baseline because we're actually measuring things. And then you can set real projections, right? But that is super uncomfortable for some people to do. But it's so critical. Otherwise, like, what are you doing? You might as well just set dollar bills on fire and watch them burn into, right?
Yeah.
Like it needs to have a purpose. Marketing should be a revenue generating function, not just an expense.
Right. Yeah. And you touch on a really important point. When people work in a fear-based environment, that's the problem. And, data can be used for good. It can be used for bad. I like to say data should be used for improvement, not for punishment. And when people are asked to set goals and they've, whether we call it a mistake or a failure, or they don't reach that goal, when punishment is happening, I think that causes a lot of problems. I heard you say yes. I'd love to hear more of either your experiences, with that dysfunction, or how we can help not. How do we avoid that dysfunction?
I think that you just make it a safe space to fail, honestly, to miss the projection, right? To just take a hunch on what I think it's going to deliver, and then know that if you're wrong, that's totally okay. But at least you moved forward, right? And then the next projection, we would do this for each of our big campaigns for like spring and for summer. And when we had a big promotion, let's just set a projection and what we think we're going to generate. And you do like click-throughs and like open rates and click-throughs and revenue generated by per room and all these different things. Like pick your industry and pick the metrics for all the channels, right? Just learn and start to track the data. And then, like I said, you have a baseline and you can be like, okay, well, last year, this campaign, when we ran it, same time frame, essentially off by maybe a week for a holiday, whatever. This is what we did. How can we do better? Like what would it would be even better if XYZ kind of thing, right? And then you get there. But I think you create that safety because it's safe for people to fail. It's safe to get it wrong. Just do it. You just start by starting.
And it seems like there's opportunities, like even digital marketing platforms that I use, whether it's email marketing, a little bit that I do with LinkedIn ads. There's all sorts of decisions you could make. And it seems like these platforms really encourage you to do some sort of small test. Like, I don't know which subject line is going to perform better. Well, you don't need to know. You can do a test. And then based on what you've learned, you could use a small failure to prevent a big failure. And I think that's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. And I will tell you what, when I was in that role at Chase, we had so much ability to test and learn and optimize. We were constantly in many different channels. If you want to know what works in digital or in email and whatever, look at a bank and see what they're doing, because they had tested and tested and tested and learned into that. And so if it's there and it's there consistently, they've optimized that because they figured out the button should be this color. This is what the word should be. This is what the subject line should be, et cetera, right? So when I look for solutions for clients, often I'll go back to financial services and say, and here's why: they have the wherewithal in terms of the money and the resources and enough consumers that they can get really, really good data that's statistically significant enough to optimize and say, this is the new baseline. And then they constantly test against it.
Yeah. There's a lot of great methods. Sorry?
Yeah. You got to iterate.
Exactly. Exactly. So, again, our guest, she's having another sip of her Woodford, Sheila Butler, Butler Marketing Group, host of Marketing Over Bourbon. Maybe as a final question for you related to marketing is the old. I think it's an old expression, an old joke. Half of your ad spend is wasted, but good luck knowing which half. Was that ever true, or is that changing nowadays with better data?
You know what? I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know because is it better data? It's maybe more data,
Mm,
but sometimes the data is conflicting, right? So, hard to say, honestly. I
yeah.
don't know. What do you think? How would you answer that question?
I would hope that we have better data, but I mean, I think the experiments I run are on a small scale. The data might be inconclusive. Like, am I doing a small test that's large enough
Right.
to be better than random coin flip information? So I think it seems like there would be advantages for bigger companies to better scale their learning. The small mistake is
Absolutely.
proportionally really small,
Right.
I
Right.
would hope. But we'll figure that out. There's the new the new frontier. We have enough bourbon to figure that out, or make that cloudier. No, but I hope your podcast continues to be off to a great start. Marketing Over Bourbon. There will be links in the show notes to the podcast, Sheila's website, Butler Marketing Group, and more. So, did you keep enough in your glass for kind of a final cheers? You
Absolutely.
did.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes.
Sheila, thank you for being our guest here today. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Mistakes
Cheers.
over bourbon. Cheers.
Absolutely.